We all know Bubsy at this point. He is the ultimate joke of the gaming industry and was the poster child of the problem of oversaturating the game market, which at the time was nothing but mascot platformers. Bubsy had 3 main games in the 90s and then just disappeared. And the main reason is because Accolade just shut down, with the amount of money they put into Bubsy usually being cited as the nail in the coffin. And you know the weirdest thing? He's back. Randomly in 2017, a trailer dropped saying we were getting a new Bubsy game for the current gen consoles. And you know what? That takes balls. Especially in a year where we got Sonic Mania, Cuphead, Hey Pikmin, Samus Returns, Hollow Knight, and that's just naming some 2D platformers. And to show my appreciation for the idiotic orange Bobcat, I'm going to be playing through all of his mainline games up to today in the next few videos. So, let's get started with the Bubsy Twofer. The puns are already starting. Bubsy's first game was released in 1993 and was called Bubsy and Claws Encounters of the Furred Kind. Michael Berlin was a writer and designer on many story-focused games at many different companies. He was bored and wanted to try something new, so he wanted to make a platformer. And when he proposed that, all of his executives laughed in his face. But he managed to convince one of them and was told to write an analysis on why the original Sonic the Hedgehog was so fun. Even though it was probably a joke just to shut Berlin up, he took it to heart. He played Sonic the Hedgehog for nearly 10 hours a day to find out what made it so special. And after reading what Berlin wrote, the project was allowed to finally move forward. Along with the game, there was a full pilot for a cartoon show, something that the development team actually had to cringe through according to interviews. At the time of release, the game actually managed to be reviewed quite well and sold enough to actually get a sequel made. But for some reason, an entirely different team worked on it with no connection to Berlin and his original team. And according to Berlin himself, they really hated Bubsy. Bubsy 2 was released only a year later, and even though it was reviewed much better than the first, it sold much, much worse. And here we are, nearly 24 years later. I put this off long enough. Let's play some Bubsy.
What could possibly go wrong?
Off the bat, the obvious influence of this game is Sonic the Hedgehog. What do you expect after the man forced himself to play Sonic for 10 hours a day? And let me just warn you real quick, I'm gonna be comparing Bubsy a lot to Sonic. So Bubsy is definitely a game that will take a lot of time to get used to. Bubsy feels very floaty and picks up speed similar to the way Sonic does, but the main problem is that he can only take a single hit per life. In Sonic, rings are both a second chance after being hit as well as an incentive to play well. Since one hit makes you lose all of your rings anyway, you want to play to see how many rings you can keep at the end of the level, as well as the chance to get an extra life. That game also gives you various ways to defend yourself. Say you're running fast and you see an enemy approaching, you can spin dash, keep your momentum, and keep moving forward. Bubsy's only mean of attack is a jump, and even then, kinda. Enemies' hitboxes are very confusing in this game with how floaty Bubsy feels. I'm always scared that I won't land on top of them, but rather right next to them. It's terrifying because I really hate being forced backward, and with one hit lives, I'm forced to play this game very, very carefully. Sonic's level design allows you to build up speed, and the focus is keeping that speed. With Bubsy's level design, I feel safer just jumping and praying my next jump won't be to my death. Thankfully, the level design is closer to a Mario game, but even Mario gives you a second chance and ways to defend yourself through many different power-ups. Bubsy's floaty nature also makes even the slightest movement more terrifying than any Resident Evil game could ever hope to do. Again, like in Sonic 1, there are roughly 3 chapters per level, with the 3rd chapter having a boss. Honestly, for the time, the graphics don't look half bad. The number of individual sprites drawn for Bubsy is actually really impressive. If Bubsy's anything, it's expressive. There's an animation for absolutely anything and everything. That's also the main problem. There's an animation for absolutely everything. Run too fast into a wall, he'll smack into it. Run into an enemy, there's like 3 different death animations that could play. Fall from too high, there's an animation for that.
Wait a minute, what the fuck?
This is a platformer with fall damage. Imagine that. You fall from too high, you will die. And being able to tell how high you are is something nearly impossible with this game. Next time you play Sonic 1, look at the background as you're moving. It was one of the main things that people loved about the graphical style of the Sonic games. The multiple layers of the background gave you a general idea where vertically you were in the level. But here, the background stays at the same vertical axis no matter where you are. So I never know when I jump if it'll be a few feet or a few miles. To counter this, Bubsy has this glide. It sort of cancels gravity so you won't start plummeting to your death. But it doesn't feel graceful, and it honestly feels like you go from falling like a brick to falling like a brick with a single balloon tied to it. The only way I can play this is by inching along slowly, jumping and gliding, and then attempting to land in a way that will let me find solid ground to be able to let me do this all over again. The game also gives you 9 lives because comedy's dead.
Don't get attached to those lives, they'll be going very quickly.
The password system is what got me through this game, because every time you get a game over, and you will get a game over, it resets to the start of the game. Continues are also these items that are very hard to come by. The game wants you to explore, but exploring is like a death trap and you will just want to finish the game. Bubsy is built for speed, but you won't ever use it. The game wants you to explore, but you'll always be too scared to. Every chapter has its own stupid pun, and Bubsy will make a quip for every single one of them.
What could possibly go wrong? Did I mention I don't like heights? More like a bridge too short.
Other than that, Bubsy is surprisingly quiet.
But now every time you die, you're gonna be hearing those same quips over and over and over again.
Every time you die, you hear it and slowly start understanding why people drink bleach. So at the end of the village, you fight these UFO guys and move on to the fair, and here's where all the problems start becoming worse. A major problem with the art design of this game is that I cannot tell what's part of the background and what is an enemy, and that adds to the terror because again, one hit means death. I try to stay in the higher parts of the level because less enemies spawn toward the top, but one misstep and you have to start freaking out. I keep dying and having to restart and staring at this weird pickled Donald Trump.
Grab him by the pussy.
These levels are grueling, especially Chapter 6 where part of it is a funhouse maze. Thank God the boss is just recycled from the first area. Yeah, were you really expecting any different? The next few levels are the Wild West, with each one being a stupid pun on some Western movie, and this is really where the game starts to grate on me. If I weren't reviewing it, I would stop right here because these levels I feel truly are just unfair. Everything is a death trap, everything gets annoying, and it got to the point where I memorized the codes for each of these chapters. This is where the game goes from being endearing to annoying. If you made it this far, it means you either got the passwords from online or you're actually trying to complete it. If you're doing the latter, all the charm is lost by this point. I wasn't having fun anymore. I just know every trick this game's gonna throw at me. It's like when I was playing Sonic Boom. There was a point where how terrible it was really fun, but after the game stopped surprising me, I was bored. The annoying puns got boring, the deaths got boring, the password system got boring. I was bored, and I still had a majority of the game to go. The next level is Canada, I guess? That's what the wiki says anyway. Here the game just goes all out. The bottom of the stages are completely submerged in water, and if you land in it, yep, you end up dead. You can take a raft to get to the end, but it's easier said than done. The level actually manages to be easier if you stay higher, but here the game loves to have every ledge be as tiny as possible and have every enemy have projectiles. Every area just looks the same, and since this time the bottom is a death trap, one misstep is almost a guaranteed death. It's at this point of the game where I ran out of wine and my interest was starting to dwindle. But I still had one more set of levels to go. I get started with the jungle levels, and this is when the level design fully moves up to vertical platforming. Oh god. And since now the level design is forcing you to move up, they try to stop you at every turn. It's also when I realize whenever you show up that the woolies are very scared of you. Oh yeah, that's what they're called, the woolies. The woolies are scared and react whenever you approach them. This makes me think that they're innocent in all this. I can't help but think that Bubsy's actually the villain. These guys are minding their own business, and here comes this bobcat screwing it all up. They're all just trying to defend themselves from this bloodthirsty cat murdering all their friends. I also want to point out that the Steam releases are just emulators, playing the SNES version of these games. And it was around this point that my emulator really seemed to be starting to crap out. In this footage I've been using, you can tell that there are a bunch of times of random slowdown, but here it just became unbearable. But I did it, and we get to the final level and I hear this.
Whoa, are you still playing this thing?
And that's when I realized it. I was still playing this game. I can easily say that Bubsy was one of the worst gaming experiences I've ever had. A better man would have seen it through to the end. I instead shut it off and got another bottle of wine. Why?
I still have to play Bubsy 2!
So when you boot up Bubsy 2, it gives you a menagerie of bullshit you're gonna be dealing with throughout the entire game, and it's so uninspired even Bubsy doesn't care. When you press start, it gives you the choice of going east or west, and when I looked at the promotional material, it says over 30 levels. Each wing has multiple floors, and in order to move on to the next floor, you have to beat all the stages. Doing so unlocks the boss battle of that floor, and then you lather, rinse, and repeat. I must say, at least the game feels a bit more fair than the first one. It's a bit more open-ended, which lets you pick the levels you want to do. If something's giving you trouble, back out and pick a different level. You also have a health bar, which means getting hit once isn't a death sentence anymore. And most levels even have these arrows meant to guide you around the stage, which makes attempting to navigate these levels a bit easier than Bubsy 1 as well. There's also power-ups you can cycle through and use using the face buttons. But the only one you're ever really going to be using is the Nerf gun. No, I'm not trying to be funny, it's legit just a Nerf gun. Because Bubsy is nothing but pure marketing gone horribly, horribly wrong. Bubsy also falls much faster than he did beforehand, which means you're really gonna want to hold on to the glide button because there is still fall damage. Luckily, falls aren't nearly as bad as before, and the level design generally tends to be much better than the original Bubsy. Everything in this game manages to play like something I honestly feel like could have been an okay platformer for the SNES.
But then you realize the quality's only skin deep.
Despite there being only 30 levels or only 5 different zones, and those will get repetitive. Similarly to Bubsy 1, the level design just feels the same because the assets just keep getting reused. And since the level design is still sort of insane and nonsensical like Bubsy 1, the only way to increase the difficulty of the game is by adding more and more enemies. By the latter parts of the game, it becomes bad for a myriad of reasons that almost make me feel as bad as I did in the later levels of Bubsy 1. With so many enemies and hazards, you will start feeling as frail as you did in Bubsy 1. The only way to heal yourself is by these bandages, and their spawn rates become more and more infrequent as you progress. There are also these plane sequences for some reason, and they thought it would be a great idea to make these levels as open-ended as normal Bubsy game design. Here there are no arrows, and the doors take you to random points in the level, and everything looks the same because it's the freaking sky! So you have no sense of space, you don't know where it is you need to go, and it's hard to tell if something will hurt you or if it's just the background. And that is the fantastic mess that is the Bubsy series. If you thought hearing Bubsy saying the same things every time you die was annoying, now you hear a random assortment of lines every time you start a level and every time you die.
That's it!
That is twice the Bubsy and twice the urge to add a Tide Pod to your coffee. And the biggest flaw of this game is the lack of a password system, which means there is no way to continue from where you left off the way that Bubsy 1 would let you. Like I said, there are 30 levels you need to conquer. Say you're on one of the top levels and get a game over. Unless you found a continue, which are super rare, you have to start from the beginning of the game all over again. And I think that's what makes me hate Bubsy 2 more. As a game, fundamentally, it is a better experience than the first Bubsy game. This fixes most of the problems that I had with the gameplay of it. But without that password system, I wasn't able to beat this game. It is much easier than the first game at first, but as you go on, it becomes more long and more grueling. With Bubsy 1 cycling through its different zones every 3 chapters, you at least felt a sense of progression. This game will have you playing the same 5 zones the entire game. Both the East Wing and the West Wing both have the same art assets, just different levels. Because of this, I actually got bored quicker with Bubsy 2 than I do with Bubsy 1. As much bullshit as the first game puts you through, at least it mixes up the level design and the art assets you will be seeing until the end. It oddly gives you this feeling of what am I gonna see next as you're playing the game. For Bubsy 2, you play roughly 10 minutes and you've seen everything. And you know what? With this game over, I'm done. The Bubsy 2fer has robbed me of so much. Of time, of money, of life.
And you know what? I'm done. I can't beat this game, I'm not gonna even try. The Bubsy games were lost to time for a reason. Yeah, they had better production values than most other games that came out around the same time, but that's about it. Anybody who actually played it realized how terrible it was. And yeah, the marketing was everywhere and it pushed it on us so that we made it think it was actually going to be good. And I'm just at the beginning of the marathon, too. I still have 2 other games that I need to do. But you know what? Bubsy 1 was really bad. But Bubsy 2 was at least marginally better. Maybe Bubsy 3D is the thing that kind of kicked it into high gear and fixed all the problems. But we'll figure that out in the next video, right, guys? It gets better, right? Please tell me it gets better.
Hey guys, if you can't get enough Bubsy, make sure you tune in for the live stream I'm gonna do later tonight. And if you want to keep the conversation going, then be sure to join my Discord, which you can find in the link down below. Also, be sure to subscribe so that you know when I go live and when I start playing Bubsy 3D. And while you wait, be sure to check out some of the other reviews I have on my channel. Alright guys, I'll see you next time.